Warning. The following content may contain elements that are not suitable for some audiences. Viewer discretion is advised.
Hello? Is this thing on? Hello? Hello? Hey, everybody. Welcome back. Whisper Insights, episode 2. I hope you joined us last week. If not, you can find it on YouTube, LinkedIn, or whatever your favorite podcast plays on YouTube or LinkedIn or Facebook or whatever. I don't know, but let me know if you have trouble finding it. Welcome back to episode 2. Today, I have a different co-host. That disclaimer you saw is necessary because my co-host today has said some things in the past that anger some people and upset some people. So we need to make sure that that doesn't happen again. Meaning that he won't change anything he says, but the people that get angered had a warning, so it's on them, not on us anymore. Anyways, welcome. Thank you very much. Got really good comments on the first episode. Got great comments on the conversation style. Got great comments on the model that we're using. We're going to continue to do that. It's going to be about conversations, whispered insights. We even have a logo coming up next time, so it's going to be fantastic, more professional looking. Unfortunately, you don't get a better host, so I hope you're okay with me. But anyways, we're going to get started in about 30 seconds to 1 minute with my co-host. I just wanted to do, actually, no, I have no housekeeping. So let's get going. But the whole idea here is we're going to have conversations about whispered insights. What are whispered insights? What are the considered insights? What is executive to do these days as far as finding the right people to trust, finding the right information to listen to, finding the right distribution model for that information, processing that information, getting advice, and all these things. I've been doing this for a few months, and I'm going to continue to do it until we get to the answer or to all those questions. Now, without much further ado, the model here is simple. I hate to talk by myself in front of a camera, so I have people that are smarter than me that come and we have a conversation about many different things. My co-host today is the Brohammer, the original Jon Reed. He'll do his own introduction, but I have to say that the reason that I actually wanted Jon here is because I don't know many people today that have the ability to parse through information so quickly, so effectively, and to have great communications at any level. And not only that, but he knows everybody in the game, and he actually can provide amazing conversations like you don't even know. So without any further ado, Jon Reed. Ta-da!
Thanks. Wow, we need a lot of disclaimers between you and me, don't we? Ouch.
Yeah, I know that you want to talk. I know you want to talk about Barbie, but we'll leave that for the end. So.
Oh my God, yeah. Barbie might be the one thing that's a little out of my scope. But nice to be here. Hey, I figured out how to stream this too, so I'm streaming this on my destinations also. How's that? Pretty cool.
I don't want to trigger anybody with some sensitivity, so this is my applause thing, you know.
I said to bring their snarkiest and smartest insights, so let's see what they do.
Yeah. So let's start easy. Do a quick introduction for those people who don't know you, although everybody knows who you are, but you know.
Well, been the co-founder of Diginomica for a little more than 10 years now. We just celebrated 10 years. And, I guess I'm a little bit of an outlier in the industry, but, what I'm trying to strike a balance between sort of calling BS on a lot of vendor and technology hype, but also just trying to find the intellectual curiosity and inspiration. And, a big focus of mine is transformation in the real world, like what it takes, what, where are the successes, what are the roadblocks? Because it's a really tricky balance, to be honest with you, because there's so much BS in this industry, but there's also so much opportunity. And I'm really trying to find the right balance between the two. And hopefully we can do that.
But this is the fun part about you. It's like you actually went through this when you built the Genomica because you were ahead of the curve. You saw the inflection in the model of content distribution and information distribution, and that's why the Genomica started. I mean, take us back to 10 years ago. What was the way that people consume information, right?
Well, I think one of the really frustrating things that sparked us 10 years ago was just, well, first of all, the big tech sites at the time, and you see this to this day, just really terrible reader experience, like autoplay videos all over the place and all these pop-ups and sign-ups. I used to do like these screenshots of Forbes, and I'd be like, do you guys see the article in here? like, because there'd be all these videos and everything, and like in the middle of it somewhere is like this really useful article, but you can't even find it. And I
Yeah.
was like, the business model behind that just feels desperate and corrupt. And
Yes.
so part of the idea behind what we did was like, well, you can reach a niche audience online if you have the right specialized information. The problem is that not every niche is created equal. Like I've reached some niche audiences in my internet history that weren't exactly what you would say lucrative, or they don't control budgets. And we're like, but wait a minute, like, why should a review of, say, let's just say a NetSuite conference or something, like, that a lot of budget holders might care about, why should that get buried on a big tech site in favor of some gadget review for some, I don't know, some stupid headgear of the day,
But
whatever.
isn't this the problem that and this is the part that pisses me off the most. I was an analyst for like 10 years, but for Gartner, and after that independent, right? The part that pisses me off is like there's a contract. There's an implicit contract between the provider and the reader. I'm going to give you this value, you're going to get this value, you're going to continue to come here,
Yeah,
right? And the model that you're describing destroyed the contract.
right.
So
Yeah,
so then it's not a commercial issue anymore, because making money is not hard. If like you said, throw ads everywhere, charge people for ads that don't have any impact, and you make money. But it isn't like a long-term problem. I mean, this is where transformation
yeah.
comes in. How do you guys spotted that, and how do you get started with that?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because what we said was like, can we create reader trust in our industry with a different business model? And we've really tried to do that. Now, have we always succeeded? No, I don't think we have. But I think we've
Why
also,
not? Whoa, why not?
because the content business can be challenging, and like, not every piece of content that comes out every single day is your best work or your best effort. And but at the same time, like, I think a lot of our content is written by people who really care about the enterprise and are passionate about it, and we've really tried to focus on that. And a big part of it is disclosure, because a lot of the companies that fund our site we also write about. And so,
Yeah,
you know every pretty much anyone in the industry has some of those issues. And so we just said, well, we're just going to be open about that, because that's what you're supposed to do actually in media,
yeah.
is disclose. So every single one of our blogs names our potential clients and things like that. And so that was one way we resolved that. And then, fast forward to today, we were the first publication to say we're not going to use generative AI to create any of our content. So I don't know of a publication that put out a stance on that before we did.
So you're turning the implicit contract into an explicit contract at that point. By the way, your disclaimers were great, and I copied your disclaimers. Full disclosure. Back in the day
Oh
when I
yeah,
used to blog all the time, I used to copy your disclaimers and expand it a little bit on them, because I'm a joker that way. But your disclaimers were
exactly.
great. But that turns the implicit contract into explicit contract, right? And
Right.
that's something that generates trust, right? And to me, this is one of the biggest things missing. I wrote an article on LinkedIn a few weeks ago, and I posted the links on the last show. I'll do the same this time, but it was about who can you trust? And I think that when you said trust, I'm like, that's the crux of this whole content distribution, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this is kind of where we're headed. We have this fork in the road coming up, where are we going to kind of have an information apocalypse where we don't trust anything, or how is our trust going to be formed? And from a society to not have any trust in any form of media, because you don't know if it's true, or you don't know if it was created by a machine or whatever, is a pretty destructive thing. And on the enterprise level, it's a slightly different problem, which is that if you want to have successful projects, you have to have reliable sources of information. And that's all based on trust. And so the question becomes, and I think this is an interesting topic
Hmm.
for future shows with you, is how do you establish that? And then to some extent, how do you scale that meaningfully inside an organization, which is a really interesting challenge unto itself.
Two things you said that kind of like make me question. You said that you need to have reliable information and know where the source is, and is that implying that computers are not reliable? I understand about hallucinations, Don't worry.
Mm.
That's just a problem with the large language models. We choose the stupidest technology. We hype it to no end, right? Blockchain, social, LLMs, all this stuff. But you don't think that a computer could actually be reliable and trustworthy and have, proper sourcing and blah, 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 and all this stuff?
Well, you're getting into a technical discussion, but
No,
no, I
no.
don't.
I mean, no.
No,
This is not technical.
I don't think technology is capable of that currently. No, but the thing that I write about a lot with generative AI and this type of stuff in general is that proper design accounts for some of those limitations. So, for example, like search engines kind of do that right now. They, if you type in to a conventional search engine, it provides information, but it also shows you, in many cases, not all cases, because there's a little more of an inline thing now, but there's more opportunity to kind of see, well, where did you get this information? That's a really, really important part of trust, is not trying to, I call it the overreach, the AI overreach, but you shouldn't overreach what the technology is capable of, but that doesn't mean the technology isn't powerful. So
Yeah.
the way you avoid that overreach is through this concept called explainability. And explainability is really the undernourished part of artificial intelligence at the moment.
Yeah, but that's a decision, not a feature. That's the thing. I mean, I don't want to get too technical, but that's a decision. Oh, the
It's
machine is
a
all powerful and knows everything. So,
To
shut
some
up.
extent, it's a design decision. To some
Yeah,
extent, it's an attitude. To some extent, it's a technical barrier because the large language models are a little bit more black boxy than a conventional computer program. But you can do a lot in terms of providing, in this case, readers or users, if you want to take it further, with information. So if you apply this in an enterprise context, and I'm looking for something inside of systems, and you give me the answer, oh, by the way, here's where I found this answer, and here's the relevant. You can do that, and you can show that level of explainability, and that, I think, now you start to get to the point where technology is helping you. Because look, I mean, one of the things humans are just not very good at is keeping shit sorted, and
yeah,
technology is really good at what you're describing, which is bring me the insights. You know.
right. So there's a couple of things, and let me see if I remember them. But going on, I want to keep in the conversation because this is actually great. Because my goal here is to provide. Look, there's layers of people and access to information in an enterprise, so everywhere in the world, right? I mean, let's be honest. There's refinement that goes up as your, social, economic, and work scale, scale goes up. A person working in the front line doesn't need as much access to refined information as a person on the top. And my goal would be to get closer to the top as we go. And I think that the problem that we have is we've been taking care of everybody in the front line to the middle level, and we haven't taken care of anybody from the middle level and up. And that's where the goal with Per Insights is trying to go to that level. They start going up to an executive level, right? Any executive would tell you, I don't have time. You give me an answer, it has to be 30 seconds to 2 minutes, and it needs to be pre-chewed and consumable and everything. And yeah, I'm going to trust you that you've done the work, and that is that is true and everything. So I mean, I don't have a problem if it comes from a computer, as long as the computer is actually giving the right answer. That's the key. So continuing what you're saying, I think that there is value in using the computer and then taking the computer output and feeding it to somebody like you that actually can spot the BS in the computer output and circle it and all this stuff, and then keep going from there. So why couldn't we use a computer as an input to what we do? I
We
mean,
absolutely can. and
yeah. I'm
and
glad you
and
agree with me, because if not, we're going to have a very ugly conversation.
we absolutely can. uh, but it's one of the reasons why I describe this technology as an evolution, not a revolution, because the human needs to be in the loop, which is an evolution of our
Of
current work,
course.
not a revolutionary circumstances. As many will use this word revolutionary, I would say fairly irresponsibly in this context, but absolutely, it can be incredibly useful. And so I'm a bit of a curator, right, of information, and I rely quite heavily on technology to curate. So
Yeah.
like in my weekly column, hits and misses or whatever, that's pulled from about 1,200 feeds that I monitor. I can't do that on my own. I use technology to monitor those feeds. And it's a natural extension of that to start asking the machines to take a little more responsibility for surfacing information and compiling it. And in fact, one of the strengths of these machines is to summarize information for you. And so
Of
to pull
course.
some of that, it's
Yeah.
just really, really important to be aware that that we need to compensate for the weaknesses of those as well. And so that's what I'm looking for, is not is just a much more precise discussion around what the pros and cons are. And frankly, I think that's what enterprise buyers want too.
You and I had a conversation about 2 3 months ago, which was great, which actually gave me a lot of the basis I needed for this model, right? I mean, the model for me is simple. I will totally use and abuse a computer because that's what they're there for. We made
Yeah.
them to be our peons, to go do the work that we don't want to do.
Yeah.
I get your news. I get your news feed every day from the Genomica, and I get some of the articles, and I get your feed. I don't know what we used to call them, like IRCs or no IRCs, whatever they were.
Yeah.
RSS, the RSS. When RSS died, I mean, I get your feed, and it's great, but it's a data point, right? And that's the way that I think it should be used. I mean, computers will go and find all the information that is relevant. You give parameters, and what LLM has done, and what this chat PT or whatever it's called has done, is basically given us an easy way to get all that information, and constraining as much as possible. I want this, this, and this. I don't want this and this. I don't want this and this. I don't want to look at this size. I want to look at the size. You build that query long enough, you have thousands of parameters available through ChatGPT, and you can get literally the 15 articles every day that you need to know about, instead of getting an influx of information that is useless, right?
But here's the interesting, important point: is that if the machine behaves like the social herd and just ranks the most popular articles and gives you those, then I don't like your chances. And I always tell people, and this ties into your conversation you had with Alan, is if all you're doing is just listening to the same herd conversation, you're going to have herd level insights, which actually aren't differentiated insights at all. And so one of the fascinating things is social media is not a meritocracy of information. And so one of the reasons why I maintain 1,200 news feeds within a newsreader, in my case it's called NewsBlur, is because that way the algorithm doesn't get to tell me what's important. I've ranked those feeds to some extent based on the caliber of the writer, because I know certain writers, how well they know this field. I want to see every single story that they've written. I don't give a crap whether it's in the top 15 articles or not. So we have to be careful with machines, because if they rely on the same viral metrics that we do socially, you're just going to get marketing crap, and occasionally you might get a great post, but just be a little bit careful about the curation things and make sure that your curation algorithm is not just about popularity.
Here's the most interesting. I love what he just said, but here's the most interesting part of that. You have to optimize the algorithm constantly. You can't just create a model or an algorithm and just
Right.
let it go. I mean, things change, right? I used to talk about, I don't even know what I used to talk in those days. Oh, I know, Cobra and cloud and shit like that. And then I moved to customer service and CRM, and then I moved to CX and artificial. I can have a million topics. And if you have me only there as a customer service expert, by now, the input that he gets from me is crap for customer service. And if you only create a filter for customer service and you have my name in there, like Twitter list used to do and all these things, you get crap, because I have nothing that is of value. I mean, I moved on, and everybody does. And this is the same for like the reader, right? And this is a critical part where I think that you and the team at the Genomica have managed to capture this really well. The reader evolves, and your content evolves with the reader versus being always the same. And this is what actually makes the traditional magazines like Forbes and Newsweek and Time basically worthless at this time. It's like, the reader evolves, but the magazine remains the same, right? It's like, we're still going to choose the person of the year, even though like 4 years ago, amidst the whole, the inclusiveness thing, we decided that there's no more person of the year because we're all equals or whatever. Bad example, but that's what we do, right? Oh, we're all equals now. There's no more better person than another person. But Time still will choose the person of the year, and then everybody in PR and marketing world would go and advertising like it's the best thing, the sexiest man alive. It's like Anyway, the point that I'm going to is like the readership evolves, and this is where I believe that following the content for the last 10 years, you and the Genomica have managed to evolve, and that's the critical part, right? So how do you guys spot that, and how do you actually move that forward? We're talking about content creation and distribution. It's the critical for anybody, but how do you actually pivot with the market and take the inflection points?
Well, I think one of there's a couple of big things. I mean,
Ooh, deep voice. This is going to be good.
what? Well, one of the things is that is that when you get too attached to narratives, things get rigid. So, for example, if you decide, oh, this vendor is legacy, or this vendor is cutting edge, or this technology is good, or or like, even if I'll take something like blockchain, where like I don't have a lot of patience for a lot of blockchain propaganda, but at the same time, I will sit down with someone who's working on a project in that area and try to keep an open mind, because the biggest thing is like, you have to be open to how things are shifting. That's number one. But number two, from a diginomic perspective, the other thing that's really important to us is documenting this from a customer use case and adoption perspective. And so one of the reasons I always push back so hard on the Web3 and metaverse stuff is I would just point out, and this is not any kind of a genius insight, but there's no adoption here. Like, that basically certain individuals are fantasizing about adoption that doesn't really exist outside of a crypto context. And so adoption is a really, really key variable in all of this that has to be paid attention to. And that's why generative AI and AI in general became so interesting, was that the adoption was undeniable and was forcing the issue. And so you have to pay a lot of attention to that.
Isn't there a difference between adoption and, like, just following the hype? I mean, this is the,
Yep.
the level where social media influencers and whatever they're called today are also like falling like dominoes, right? I mean, there's a difference. Yeah. And what is the difference?
There absolutely is, which is why, well, there's a couple different components to this. I mean, when you talk about adoption, what that means is then you have to sit down with those customers and have really honest conversations with them about the project and the results they got out of it, and the business
Mhm.
results they got out of it, and what the challenges were and how they overcame those challenges. And it has to be a really honest, unfiltered conversation to really understand that. And so part of it is just really documenting what are the gains here, like what made a difference in your product and in the lives of your employees and how you serve customers, which is always really interesting for me, because I came from a lot of ERP thinking originally. And so, but even when I find myself at an ERP show these days, I'm always asking customers, how does this technology help you serve your customers better? Because we don't have time anymore. We don't have time anymore for internal facing projects. So you have to be able to answer that question. But from a generative AI perspective, when you ask about adoption, you sound a little bit cynical, but the reality, Esteban, is that when you see surveys that 70% of marketing people are using these tools, then you have to pay a little bit of attention to that from the vantage point of, are we exposing corporate information? Because what we've learned is that these data sets incorporate what you put into that. So if you're copying and pasting proprietary corporate data into a third-party tool, that's potentially creating, like, that's shadow IT on steroids right there, because you're taking data outside the enterprise, not using tools that weren't authorized, but putting data outside the firewall that you may not want. And so it forces the issue and forces you to think about it. It doesn't mean you have to go start a generative AI project, but it forces the issue when people are using these tools on their own.
But it's interesting that he brought that up, because that's actually an implementation decision on whether or not to share the data back to the model, and how stupid can you be to say, yes, go ahead and share my data with the model, right? I mean, this is, forget proprietary
check the
information.
Check the headlines, man. It's already happened many times.
I know, but like, again, how stupid can you be is not a question that I need to answer. Okay, I know the answer to that.
Yeah, right. Sorry,
I got the answer, but my point is, like, this goes back to, like, the constant question. I mean, I always go back to the same question when I talk to an executive, right, and they're talking to me. They don't want me to give them, like, fluff bullshit, or, like, stuff that doesn't matter. They want me to have read everything there is to be read, create my 2 or 3 or 5 talking points, and in the 15 minutes I have, dispense to them the greatest wisdom they ever heard about any topic. They'll write one thing down, And that's what they're going to go and like try and take to the team. This is the model that works with every executive that I talk to pretty much always, right? And this is the part that the concern is like, about these models. My basic model on how to solve the issue of information collection, which you and I talked about before, and I think that you're doing, manually, and I would try to not replace but enhance what you do with a computer. By the way, nice use of words there. AI won't replace you and will enhance you. But
that's so
that's
reassuring,
platitude.
Esteban. Thank you.
That's called
Thanks
a
for
platitude,
that.
dude. That's called a platitude. Every AI expert in the next 2 weeks is going to say that now. But no, the way to enhance this is like there's not that there's greater value to what you do. There's like there's irreplaceable value to what you and I do. Because I can find 20 articles and 3 PDFs and read them in one morning and come up with like five bullet points. ChatGPT cannot do that. No matter how much you constrain it, it cannot do that, because the things that are missing, like intuition and imagination and like the ability to have a history that goes beyond the model that they've been trained on, right? That's what you and I have. I mean, you said yourself, you're ERP, but you're talking to people about serving customers. A ChatGPT model trained on ERP would not even know what a customer is.
So just to kind of set up a contrast, because I think this might play into what you're talking about. So like, every week when I do my weekly hits and misses review, I really want, my goal there is to kind of, if you've been like busting your butt all week on various projects and you want to take the pulse of what's gone down in our industry that week and get an opinionated take on it, along with some of the best content that I saw that week from my perspective, like you're going to get that there. But I don't sit there when I write that and say, this is for, a board level executive or a CEO, because they don't have that time. Like some C level CX will read that, and project managers. But when I have a board level meeting, those are almost always a half an hour.
Mm-hmm.
And a good chunk of that meeting is usually listening to the board member,
Mm-hmm.
what's on their mind. And
Yeah.
then usually I will have 5 or 10 minutes at the end to say my piece.
Yeah.
And at that point, and just to add to what you're saying, my job is to distill everything I've seen and give them 1, 2, or 3 key points about the market that I think are most impactful to them. That's what they want. They want
That's
something very, very highly curated. A machine at this point in time, could never provide them with that, but it could feed into the content that I would consume and organize to make that, for sure. But the other thing that I think you left out that's really important is I will also have the audacity to tell them what I think they should do with that information. Now, they may not act on what I tell them to do, and I'm certainly not assuming that it's the right thing, but I want to actually give them what I think is actionable about it, which I think is really
1000%. This, by the way, what he just described is the concept of whispered insights. It's not creating an insight, but it's telling somebody specifically what are you going to do with this, and the act or not act, it's the critical part, right? Because let's be honest, 90% of what we say out there gets taken as a data point, not as an actionable point, right? I mean, yeah. I would be shocked if I ever worked with a client and 6 months later saw exactly what I described being implemented. I would not be shocked if I see something that is a deviation or the derivative of what we discussed, because that's the whole goal. I mean, I don't have the ultimate truth, and the computers don't have the ultimate truth, and nobody does. But you need data points in order to make a decision. And a whisper insight only becomes so because somebody has both the aptitude to process and curate and create and summarize and synthesize, and then the audacity, like you said, the audacity to actually say, this is what you need to do with this. That is exactly what I want to do. I want to find the model that it doesn't have to be you and I only. I mean, could a computer do it? I don't think so, but maybe. But
you know what's interesting though about the computer is that the computer actually, I would consider the computer's insight for the action part, in the sense that some of these computers are pretty good with predictive scenarios. And I would consider presenting an executive with, and I would say, I fed this through an AI, and And this was one of the recommendations that they made on optimizing whatever. And because
Okay.
because computers are actually, for predictive stuff, their content is worth considering because they can chomp down a lot more data points than I can. But the key is you have to feel confident that whatever AI or predictive model is working with the right set of data points, which is a huge problem. And the person that I think is doing the best job on this is in the supply chain field, Laura Cesare, and almost every single one of her blogs, and including our most recent one, is all about how their whole field is limited by internal data, and they don't have an outside in data perspective, because so many of the data points that impact what a company or an executive should do live outside the traditional RDBMS systems. They even live outside social systems.
Right.
They're in machines. They're in weather data, and so I would have to be really confident that the predictive algorithm was chomping the right data.
Laura,
But if it did, I would definitely consider presenting a predictive scenario to an executive, but I would couch it in the terms of the machine recommended this. Here's what I think about it. But I wouldn't rule out presenting something like that. I have more confidence in that than I do in having a machine curate the top 3 insights.
I have no qualms with that. By the way, Laura is one of the greatest people that crafted this model that we're living in. She was one of the first people to have the audacity, like you said. I love that word, by the way, audacity. I'm gonna have to work it into something. But she was one of the first people to have the audacity to say, "Here's my content, and here's the content that I was actually asked to produce, and here's what is wrong and why it's wrong, and here's what else you can look at and see a different alternative." Because that ability to actually say those things versus just delivering content, that's what I think is going to be the critical part for the next decade or two in the world that we live in, at the very least at the executive level, but at all levels, right? I mean, we got this crap going on. I don't want to get into politics, but we got this crap going on where people just repeat platitudes and it's just platitudes and repeating stuff that they don't even think about. And the thinking is the part that computers don't do. Computers don't think. Computers repeat actions. They do what they're told, and they keep repeating it faster than we can, and with more input than we can. And that's great. We use them for that. But it's just, man, it's just frustrating to see people just becoming so lazy at consumption and doing something with it that they'll take whatever they hear at face value. I mean, LLMs don't have hallucinations. LLMs shouldn't have hallucinations. LLM only have hallucinations because people are too fucking stupid to check the source. I mean, this lawyer that actually went and put a brief in front of a judge with references to cases that they didn't exist.
Right.
Oh, here's case references. Those cases don't exist.
Yeah.
Huh. Dude, 5 minutes. Check the sources, I mean, seriously. But anyway, sorry, that's a rant, but I'll get off my rant. Hey, Brent, do not call me a charlatan of platitudes, for the love of God. You can put the other one, but not that one. Don't put the one about. I am not a charlatan of platitudes. That's what I fight against.
That's some smack talk, I would say.
That's what I fight against. So don't do that. But the other one, I agree. So 90% of what we say is taken as a data point, not as an action item. Absolutely, it should be. It should be. I mean, and that's the thing. It's like that's what I learned being an analyst. It's like most of what I do and write and produce, it's going to be taken as a data point. And this is what I love what you guys do, because you said before some of the content may not be up to. I think you say up to par. I don't remember the word, but I don't want to put words in your mouth, right? That some of the content may not be the best, or may bias or something. But the point is, like, 90% of the content you produce, it's going to be used as as a stepping stone towards something else. So why wouldn't a computer produce that for you, even without reviewing, and you put it out there with a disclaimer, warning: this text was produced by a computer. It contains summarization of existing content, but it contains no synthesis, curation, or analysis.
Well, you could do that, but we just made a decision on behalf of reader trust for our particular publication. We didn't tell other people what they should do. And to your point, I could potentially envision, publishing scenarios where you had a computer generate some text and then modify it. I mean, frankly, most of the computer generated stuff I've seen so far is total crap, as far as blog posts and things like that are concerned. But one thing I will say about that is it kind of pertains to your point a minute ago about the lawyer, that most of the people who posted generative AI blogs so far were so gleeful that the computer had written it that they didn't bother to go in and fix it and make it better. Mostly in the tech industry, unfortunately, generative AI content is full of techno jargon and overconfident phraseology, which are two things that I really can't stand in writing. And so I'd much rather start with a blank page than start with that bullshit. But that's more of a personal preference for me. For our publication, it's really more about just letting our readers know that you're reading human generated content, because we just feel it's important for reader trust for us. But I would not say that you could never write a good piece using computer generated content. But what I would say is that I think the strengths of these programs especially play to the supporting roles that they play in things like organizing research and content and things like that. And in fact, like, I use AI for a variety of things within the context of my content production, whether it's researching content or whether it's the Grammarly for spell check. I'll run plagiarism checks on quotes sometimes to make sure that stuff I have quoted didn't appear elsewhere. I did that last night with something, Otter for machine transcripts. So there's all kinds of stuff that I'm using AI for. So I'm not at all opposed to machines have something to do with the content I produce every day, and that doesn't go away. We just took a pretty hard stance on that just because we felt it was important for our publication, in particular for reader trust. But I'm not saying to you, Esteban, that you couldn't write a good essay that way. Though when you try to do that, I'll bet you're going to find the same jargon problem that I found, because these programs pull jargon because our industry is full of jargon, and that's what they've been trained on. And I don't like communicating in techno jargon bullshit. I don't think it works.
But here's the thing, without going into details, here's the thing. You could actually instruct an LLM to use a certain specific writing or speaking style that includes no jargon, no technology words, 12th grade, 8th grade, 20th grade, or whatever, right?
You can try, but the training material isn't there for that. I mean, I'd like to see what you can come up with, and let's go ahead and send it to me, and let's see what you can do. I have yet to see anything insightful come out of that.
I did this exercise with a friend of mine once when we actually took a piece of written literature, it was Shakespeare in this case, and we fed it to a ChatGPT and we said, rewrite this and we used actually 20 or 30 different regional speaking modes from the UK and from US.
Oh yeah, for sure it can do that, but it can't. But it can't. You can't say rewrite this piece in the form of an enterprise software commentary, but don't use industry jargon. It won't understand that. It won't be able to do it.
That would be an excellent scenario. Actually,
I'm going to do it.
I'm going to do it, and then we can compare that. I'm going to find somebody. The problem is I don't want to piss off anybody by using their PR content, right? But
have fun with that. It's been trained on techno jargon for our industry. That's what it thinks. Hi, Alan. Hey, by the way, Alan, congratulations on stirring the pot so thoroughly last week for me. You totally tweaked me on that whole blog conversation thing. That was brilliant.
Yeah,
absolutely brilliant.
We're trying to figure out if we bring Alan back, because for him, blogs are the whole conversation, and we don't want to do that.
Oh man, let's not give Alan a hard time, because Alan did a great job of stimulating a really important topic. So
yeah. So by the way, if you have a comment, if you want to have a question, please feel free to put it in the comments, Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, whatever. Our human computer, aka Brent Leary, is fiercely looking at the comments and posting them as they show up. So please join the conversation. Yes, that's exactly what it is. I mean, we would not have an industry without jargon for that industry. That's what we think distinguishes the industry. But the point is, like, and I think that this is.
But our job, Esteban, you and I, as if you're aspiring towards whispered insights, then you need to be able to know how to communicate with customers. And if you
Of course.
communicate with customers, you better leave that jargon crap at the door and learn how to talk in terms of real problems and real issues.
So let me ask
So,
you a question. You actually, I was going to say that's our job, but like you actually can provide more insight than this, because I rely on my own experience. But how many times have you gone into an executive meeting or a board meeting and use jargon to explain what's going on?
I mean, I would not want to do it. It would not work.
Yeah,
I
right.
mean, it's
But
just,
but when you go to the engineers that are writing the product, or the people running the product, you have to use the jargon,
oh,
right?
right, because that's not some, that's not promotional. That's just, that's the words you use to communicate to get a job done. That's different. That's a different type of jargon.
But it's not no, but it's the same thing. I mean, if you talk to a marketer, you're gonna use jargon that talks to their, you know, influencers, and I don't even know what these people talk about anymore. Although, hey, I'm one of them. I should know.
Well, no,
But
because it's totally different, because tech engineers are talking to other tech engineers to get a job done. Marketers are trying to explain to customers what they do that's of value. The more jargon they put in there, the less likely it is it'll actually be understood by the customer, and the customer will actually relate to what's going on. So
yeah,
you
but
have
if
to
you feel
figure out how to explain that.
marketing speaks to an executive, you're not saying anything.
Right.
So
Exactly.
this goes to the last part that I want to cover in the last few minutes,
Exactly.
which is distribution, right? And this is the thing that to me is incredibly naive, is people that think that, and I used to be one of them. I'll be the first one to confess this. I used to say, oh, you can write one thing once to one audience and then chunk it up and distribute to different audiences. And I learned through my years that no, you cannot do that. Each audience requires a different level of like, everything, insight and curation, and like analysis, and everything in the world, right? I mean, that's the bottom line.
Right.
That's it. And so then, how do we take the content that we create? We've been talking about creating content. We're talking about, like, how do you take the input from computers? How do you actually process it? How do you analyze it? We can talk a little bit more about that. But the bottom line, uh, oh, come on, Sandy, that's not
Sandy's
true.
claiming that I don't like
Yeah,
marketers.
actually,
That's
it's not only
totally
him.
that's
It's not
totally unfair.
true.
I am a
It is.
marketer. I am a
Yeah.
marketer.
And by the way, neither one of us likes marketers, but we're marketers, so come on.
I will say that, like, I think we all do great in this industry is when we're open to input, and we take our time to understand before we put out content what
Yeah.
the issues are. I think marketers are perfectly capable of doing that. The problem is that sometimes they get a little overexcited about the Kool-Aid that they're drinking at that particular moment in time. And but the really good marketers don't, because they understand, like, hey, there's other companies doing interesting stuff too. We're not the only one. So how do we communicate what we're doing in a way that resonates with people and isn't just the same claptrap in the same terms? Like, we have the best DevOps. What does that mean? How does that help me understand what you do? It doesn't. So,
Oh,
so
that's developer operations.
yeah. Okay, cool. Anyway, you were getting at something. You were getting at something important. You've been
I
driving this.
know.
You're driving
I'm
this
trying.
conversation somewhere. So where are you trying to get us?
I'm trying to get to distribution, which has changed dramatically over the last 2 decades, right?
Distribution. Right. Yes.
When I first joined Gartner, we were trained on, like, the model of writing, and we were trained on the model of editing, and we trained on the model of distribution. And it took 3-4 weeks to produce, if you were lucky, to produce a note from zero to publication. And then the note was there, and it was static and never went anywhere. And it was only one type of note. And if you look at Gartner content today, Gene Hall, the new CEO for the last 15 years or so, be thankful for this. It's just basically a content production machine with chunking and dicing and repurposing in different ways, right? And that evolution, I personally, I don't like it, and that's one of the reasons I left. I didn't want to be a content writer for no reason. I wanted to provide more analysis, but that distribution, it requires, it requires two problems, or actually carries with it two problems. One is you don't actually write for a specific audience, and two, your content becomes crap really quick because it's only made for, like, eyeballs, not for insights.
Mm-hmm.
And I always said I'd rather have, like, 100 brains than 10,000 eyeballs, because the brains is actually what I'm looking for and what I write, you know.
Well, here's
So
where I get to eat some humble pie because I had to accept how much the market has changed and respond to that. I mean, there was a time where I would really romanticize the idea that if you create the best content, then people will come, basically. And there was a time in the internet where that was more true because people would bookmark pages and come back to them and all that kind of thing. Now it's now things have completely changed. And you know, while I will still maintain that both for individuals and organizations, creating exceptional content is often the key thing that has to happen, the distribution part of that has become really a lot more central. And the it's basically this notion of an opt-in value exchange that essentially if I consume something from you, Esteban, that I like, the idea is that then you offer me a chance to quote unquote subscribe and get more of your stylings on a more regular basis. You know, for example, LinkedIn, and I've been bothering LinkedIn about this, should provide an opportunity to subscribe to your video show. Right now, LinkedIn doesn't do that, but they should, because I should be able to opt in and keep getting this information. And the notifications from you are welcome to me because I want to see your whispered insights. I want you to whisper in my ear with your latest enterprise thinking. So suddenly the notification stream is not annoying to me. It's helpful because I asked for that and I asked you to come a little bit closer into my life. The holy grail of all of this, which AI is trying to solve but has not solved, is get me the right content at the right time, at the right rhythm, and the right format that I want. And that is a very, very difficult problem because we're moving around all the time. We have
no,
different
it's not.
devices. We
No,
have
it's
different
not.
form
No, it's not.
factors.
No, it's not. No, it's not.
Oh,
No,
yeah,
it's
it
not.
is.
No,
It's a
it's
very
not. It's
difficult
not.
problem.
It's not. It's not. Let me tell you why it's not. Because the reason it is, right? Uh, Say he looks forward. Oh, come on, dude. Seriously, everybody says that. I you know,
Uh,
I've been dating for a couple of
yeah.
years. Everybody
Well,
says that.
keep in mind, I
Everyone
haven't.
knows.
Keep in mind, it's been a while since Esteban and I have done a show together, so maybe I'll change my mind
Yeah,
after.
that's
It's
right.
nice that Meg still bookmark pages and comes back to
I
them
know.
sometimes. That is
Actually, by the way, Meg,
that is old
excellent.
school.
Meg, that was an excellent show you did with Paul and Brent. Thanks for
Yeah, no
rescuing
doubt.
their show and providing greatness. But the thing about bookmarking, before I go back to the content, why it's not hard to do. The thing about bookmarking does the same as note taking. Once we bookmark something, the fact that we have it open and we look at the title, even if we read or we didn't read it, means that that's something that, like, it's like a little bullet point that we wrote at one time, that when we go back to it, refreshes to us why we were looking at that. And when it doesn't, that's when you close the bookmark. That's very simple. But
Okay, so
that's the way I use it.
let's hear how you solved right place, right time, right frequency,
The
because
problem with
the entire industry hasn't solved it, but you have. That's awesome. Let's hear
no,
how you solved it.
I'm not solving the problem. I'm telling you how it's possible, which is different. For me to solve it, it would
Okay.
take a lot longer than this conversation. But why is it possible? It's possible because if we actually look at the information, if you actually look at the information in a way that actually go down to the piece of information itself versus the big article, right? And I had this conversation with people from Salesforce. I had this conversation with Steve. What's his last name? I'm horrible with names. I'm sorry. Yeah, Gilmore. I had this conversation with Steve Gilmore once, off air, and then once on air with him. If you get to the point that, like, you look at the information, everything that's been produced, and you get down to the specific content itself, not the big piece, but the specific sentence, and you actually run that sentence through an ontology and taxonomy and all this stuff, and you actually understand the intent and the content and the context of that specific sentence or word or whatever, right? Then you can actually get to solve the problem of, like, finding the right time to put that information in the right place, at the right cadence, in the right medium. Now, the reason we don't do it is because we didn't have the technology until 2 or 3 years ago. And ChatGPT is actually the first piece of technology that shows us that this is possible, right? Vendors tried Dropbox and Box and even Salesforce files for a while. They tried to get to that model and they couldn't do it because we didn't have the processing power. Now we do. So when I say it's like it's
Well,
possible, I didn't say that it's solved.
Yeah, it's possible on a certain level. By the way, Alan, your point on curation being a big challenge in a knowledge abundance world, I definitely agree with that. And you may have missed part of our earlier conversation, but I think we covered off curation pretty well earlier. But absolutely, in terms of Esteban's whispered insights model, the value add of proper curation is really, I think, central to everything we're talking about. Um, Esteban, to your point, like one of the things I think is interesting about generative AI, and one of the things I'm looking into a little bit more myself, is that generative AI solves for this dilemma that we had where years ago there was a lot more emphasis on what I would call super user configuration, which I happen to
Hmm.
really like because I like to go deep into the bowels of settings of various applications and say, send me this once a week, send me this once a month, send me this
So
once a
we don't
quarter,
we
blah
don't
blah
we don't
blah.
call it
Check.
God
Yeah.
mode anymore. We don't want to
Yeah,
piss off
but
anybody.
mostly we've gone away from that because it's a pain to manage. Most people don't have the time and energy to set up. So got very simple and said, "Oh, we'll just let the machines are going to guess when to send you what, when to show you what." I don't think that works very well, but I think what generative AI can do is in an interactive model, like ask you, Esteban, what kind of information do you want? How often do you want it? Do you like to receive it on this device or that device? You can have more of a pleasant interactive experience explaining your preferences. So instead of AI trying to guess what it is you want, the generative AI component can create an interactive scenario to gather that information, and then it actually knows.
But
But
this is
the second challenge that has not been solved, so I actually think we're pretty close to solving that part of it. Um, to your point, the second part that is not solved yet is the intelligent distribution mechanism that allows that to then happen. So, for example, if I say, "Yeah, Esteban, I really enjoy your show. Can you notify me once a week on Facebook Messenger that is happening?" Right now, you can't do that, um, but because you can't accommodate all the different communication modes and preferences that people have. But I think it could eventually be solved. It just isn't solved right now.
I agree that it's not solved, but I mean, so then we go back to like the possibility versus the reality, right? And this comes down to economics for the most part. If people were to pay for it, one way or another, and the one way for another means like if you were to pay for it, but allowing me to like use the data that he provided as
Sure.
marketing fodder, so I can give you more shit that you don't want to see because now you actually the money that is costing me, I'm making it back in ad revenue, or you're paying a subscription to get access to that. If people were to pay for that, it would exist. This is not a none of those issues are complex to solve with the right economics. The problem is like our entire fucking internet is built on the fact that like you're a recipient of coupons. That's the whole thing. So we missed out dramatically on a distribution model that should have changed the world by resorting back to like coupons. I mean
We
that's
did,
the
and
problem.
we also became a lot more fragmented, and mobile consumption changed a lot of things, and there's a lot of generational shifts going on in terms of how people consume information, and it's been hard to keep up with all of that. But I do think these are solvable problems. I guess the point I just really wanted to make, and for those who want to dig into that, I wrote a longer debook on Diginomic about the informed buyer that gets into some of this stuff, is that AI is not smart enough to know what I want to see at any given time. I really object to that. But AI can like attempt to guess, but it really can't. What what AI can do though is in the new form of generative is it can draw out my preferences in a way that's engaging and interesting to me. Whereas
Yeah.
before it could not, and now it can. And I think to me, that's if there's one thing I'm excited about with the new forms of generative AI, it's that. So
I love what you're saying. I just wish you wouldn't say AI, but that's we'll resort to it's a jargon.
I'm using it. Yeah. In this
It's
case,
fucking jargon.
this is a great example of why we are compelled to use jargon because in the case of
Yeah.
AI, there's no other word I can use at the moment.
No, a lot of
But
what you're talking, a lot of what you're talking about is a question of analytics, probability, predictive and prescriptive analytics, and so forth. But then the problem is if you go into that level, now we're too technical and people don't know the difference between like
right.
prescriptive and predictive.
Yeah.
Then we're not having a conversation. So AI is like in this case, AI is the encompassing of everything that is there.
Yeah.
right?
Well, maybe on our next show, you and I could spend a few minutes actually defining a
I would
couple of those
love to.
terms.
Yeah,
And because I'm a like I said, I think one of the ways we serve, like I'm not necessarily opposed to like using jargon at all times in my writing and stuff, but what I do want to do is try to define why I'm using it, why it matters, or why I don't think it matters. Because to me, that's what I think customers really want to do. Like, because when I went around to customers this spring, a lot of them really did want to understand generative AI and the implications for their companies. But they really wanted to do it in such a way that was really different than how vendors were presenting it, because they wanted to understand it in terms of things like risk, data privacy, uh, and also how is this going to help me to do my job better? And then the other big thing is like, when will I get it? Because that's the other problem we have with these conversations, is so much of this is so vague in terms of like what's
right.
actually possible today. This is the other lack of precision we have in our industry, is what can I actually use today that's generally available? I mean, do you remember the days when SaaS companies at conferences, everything they announced was generally available? And we totally lost track of that. That was one of the best changes in our industry, and now it's totally gone. And now every company is like, here's what we're doing, and then I have to scurry around along with everyone else and every customer trying to figure out, okay, when is this coming out? When is this coming out? When is this in beta? When is this generally available? When is it? And in the meantime, all these people are using ChatGPT on the side to try to do their jobs better. And that's the chaos that's going on right now, while you're reading about things like large language model drift and everything else, and people using tools that are perhaps insecure and not reliable. And this is our industry right now. Welcome to
It
the
is.
fun, man.
But it's been like that since I've been here 30
Oh
years, and it's
yeah.
been like that from the
Oh
beginning,
yeah.
right?
This is just as
And
particularly interesting. This is a particularly interesting example of that, is all.
I totally agree, and I think we have a couple of minutes, and I want to hear your summary, but you get to go last, so you can think about the one two
Okay.
bullet points that
By the way,
everybody needs to take away from
Alan
this.
is requesting a generative AI summary of everything he missed before he tuned in. So
You know what?
maybe we could
Actually,
do
this
that
is
next time.
it's really easy to do. We'll take the transcript of this, feed it into generative AI, and tell ChatGPT and ask him to produce a summary. Right? I mean, but here's the thing. Here's my thing. I want to continue this conversation because you and I have some very interesting things that we need to go deeper in. But to me, what we covered today, the two bullet points that you need to worry about. Number one, content creation is changing, and this is not a big duh, because it's not that it's changing the way you think; it's changing in a different way that you think. Right? It's got to be a mix of human and computers, and like and tools and automation and predictability and things like that. And we're going to see that happening over the next few years. I think that the genomica is to me is one of the bleeding edge, tip of the spear. Use whichever wonderful buzzword thing or jargon you want to use, but you guys are doing the things that are at the edge, at the bleeding edge of this stuff. When you started doing read out loud before anybody even thought about doing books on tape, or when you did the dyslexia mode to provide easier reading model for everybody. These are things that actually make a difference, right? But the content is changing. Stay tuned to the genomica. Stay tuned how we're going to do it. Number two, and this is the most important, the content creation change is nothing compared to the content distribution challenge. I think that if we can, I mean, the content exists. There's 5 fucking petabytes of information noise produced, and we've been talking about filtering this for the last 15, 20 years. And we're finally getting to the point that filtering is working well. But how to distribute it, it's the key. I think that the point that you made, the right place at the right time, in the right instrument, through the right channel, with the right cadence and everything. That's what we need to figure out going forward. Those are the 2 things you need to figure to know from my perspective from today. What are your whispered insights for the day?
Thanks, Sandy, for the shout out. Thanks for the commentary. Much appreciated.
Yeah. So if you ever find those 2 gentlemen, let me know.
I think we agree. I think the thing I like the most about coming onto your show today is I feel like I was worried that we would just have a pundit experience, but I feel like what you were getting at here was trying to advance a conversation. So I feel like with the help of some of our attendees here who are really smart people, I think we advanced this from where we started. And
Mhm.
to me, that makes me optimistic for what we can accomplish in future shows, because perhaps we can actually get somewhere on some of these issues in a way that can make a difference in our lives and maybe the lives of people on these various projects and companies and stuff. And I do agree with you that the distribution aspect of this is the most difficult part at the moment in a lot of ways. But I do want to take a stand for differentiated content that requires the courage and conviction to step away from the social herd for a little while and think about what's unique and different about your point of view and find a way to get that out into the world. And I just don't think that generating that type of content is easy, but that's what I think is sacred. And I think those that do it bring something original to the table. So I just don't want to lose that and just assume that it's easy to create that, because I don't think it is or will ever
Oh,
be.
no,
So,
it's incredible. It's incredibly hard. I mean, it takes years of training and experience and having been there. And we haven't even covered. We'll cover this in future shows, but we haven't covered like uh, what do you call it, enterprise history, experiential history, the ability to correlate items that are not correlatable, through intuition and things like that. That's what we're going to talk in the future. But I love what you said, that this is difficult, and that it's going to take years. But what I love the most, and these are my closing words, and I know we are past the time, but we started late anyways. What I like the most is the fact that I said this is about advancing the items through conversations, and that's all I'm trying to do. So
cool.
and with that, that's the show. That's a wrap. I gotta find a better way. I don't have a picture of like the two of us laughing or like some
Oh, we
dog or
need like
whatever. But
Brent's got to make like a cool outro for us, huh?
that's right. I was gonna make a mention about the flamingo, but we'll have that in private because I love the
Oh,
flamingo.
yeah, we can do that later, right?
Yeah. Anyways, Brent, close it up. Thank you for everybody for joining us.
Thanks, Brent.